In this video I will discuss the many facets of anxiety, from how it feels in your body to its causes and management. Anxiety can have such far-reaching effects as full-blown panic attacks and even agoraphobia, where a person is a prisoner in their own home. It can also exert influence on a person to be a perfectionist and overachiever in ways that they are completely unaware of the influence and presence of anxiety. So what is anxiety? Basically, anxiety is a fear. Now, the most primal anxiety is the anxiety based on our physical survival. You may have heard of our fight and flight response, which is our protective mechanism against physical threat and danger. So this comes from our evolutionary biology, where it was important just to physically survive. The fight and flight response still affects us today, but the threats are more emotional threats, yet we respond in the same way. So that will explain the physical experiences of anxiety, particularly a panic attack. So imagine if you are wandering along as a caveman or as a person gathering nuts, berries, and here comes a wild animal ready to kill you. So fight or flight simply means you use the energy of primal anger to fight it and therefore preserve yourself, or you'll use the energy of primal fear to take flight and preserve yourself. In between these can be freeze, where you're overwhelmed by the experience and not sure whether taking flight or fighting is the best option. Freeze isn't an excellent way to survive, as you can actually be killed. In our modern world, with the threats being more emotional, it could be something as simple as running late to a medical appointment and being anxious at being told off by the receptionist or the doctor even. You can be anxious to look silly or stupid, or even feeling uncomfortable for not making any comments in a group conversation. There can be anxiety about performing at work and whether you will get your credit for your good work or a pay bonus, and so forth. The problem is if the anxiety is not proportional to what is going on. So this is where there are various anxious ways of thinking which can inflate an anxiety more than it needs to be present. And this is why one of the management strategies is cognitive behavioural therapy, which will be covered in my other videos. This teaches ways to have a more rational and objective appraisal of a situation and to improve the health of your thinking. However, anxiety can be very difficult to control. Physically, it feels very powerful, especially when panic symptoms are present. And these panic symptoms are what you feel with an adrenaline rush, as though you are being attacked by a wild animal. At more milder levels, people often feel anxious with the palpitations of the heart and the sweaty palms. And this can occur in many situations, particularly ones where what is going to occur is unknown. Anxiety is all about prediction of control and escape. And this is exactly caveman mentality, when your life is threatened, what ability have you got to control the situation, know that you can kill the animal, know that you can outrun it and escape. And that's what we do in our reactions. So if someone's anxious to go to a party and they're driven by somebody else who likes to stay for hours on end, then they have very little control, they can't escape, and they're going to be subject to social torture for hours. The anxiety before that situation will just be massively inflated. However, if they drive themselves there and have found an excuse to leave early, then they have control, they have escape, and they will feel a lot less anxious about it and just have anxiety at a manageable level. So that is what we need, is control and escape, and that is why it's important to have a more logical appraisal of a situation, plan and have forward thinking, and also to be more objective and rational. For instance, one anxiety management technique is to do relaxation and relaxation breathing, and go through the scenario and seeing yourself facing the challenges and actually overcoming them. And this will be attached to feeling physiologically calm and increase a feeling of control and success with the upcoming event. So this is all about primal anxiety, about emotional survival. Other anxieties include anxiety about getting our desires fulfilled. We may want something and again may not have the control around obtaining our desires, and that can actually cause us to become anxious, especially if our desires are important to us. This can be something as simple as comfort eating and not being able to get access to our favourite treats because other people in the group are eating all the cake, for instance, and so someone might get a bit controlling or grumpy over not getting their desires fulfilled. There is also a social anxiety, which does not just refer to socializing. Social anxiety basically means interacting with other people. Most people with social anxiety are comfortable to a degree with their family and closest friends. There may be some issues there and they may not be particularly talkative, but they feel they can survive these situations, or maybe even feel very comfortable in them. However, when going to either large shopping centres, to unknown places, unknown appointments, particularly social situations, and the more groups, the bigger it is, the more difficult quite often, then the social anxiety can kick in quite dramatically. Now, one of the things anxiety does is want us to avoid the anxiety. It's a survival thing. If something feels dangerous, then don't expose yourself to it. Makes complete sense in a physical caveman world. Can be difficult if you completely avoid social occasions because human beings are social animals. You can't get a lot done without interacting with people, including going to shops, going to work, doing hobbies, even going a walk around the neighbourhood. There will be some people who will cross the street when they see another person coming because the anxiety is that high. There'll be others who will not leave home for that reason. Anxiety can be quite ingrained from childhood in terms of perfectionism and overachieving, or fear of failure, fear of looking stupid, sounding silly. Perfectionism and overachieving are a fear of not being good enough, of failing, and therefore excessive effort is undertaken to complete a job thoroughly with a lot of checking and rechecking, as well as needing to complete it quickly as soon as possible. Therefore there'll be difficulties delaying a project. On the other hand, this can cause the anxiety to make a person feel completely overwhelmed at the perfectionism of the task, so the perfectionism increases the feeling of the size of the task, overwhelms a person, and hence avoidance and procrastination kicks in. So perfectionism can lead to someone feeling that things are just too big and avoid them. Other people don't avoid them, they get in there all the time and exhaust themselves. So it can be a very tiring, exhausting, debilitating experience as well. A lot of anxiety is about being rejected or abandoned and turn up in our relationships. Again, the feeling of control in the relationship is important. If one partner has more control, they get security, but often are alienating the other person. The person with less control doesn't have as much security and may feel quite anxious. This may breed resentment in a relationship. It may breed outbursts of anger at experiences of control by the other, or maybe a complete loss of voice where the person fears that abandonment and is not willing to speak up and risk loss of the relationship. So what are the common themes here with anxiety in terms of emotional survival? It's around a threat to our self-esteem and how adequate we feel, whether we're going to get embarrassed and feel stupid. It's about threats to our desires so we can get what we want, which is worse if we rely on comforts, especially alcohol, gambling and other addictions, drugs, because there's a lot of anxiety about securing the next fix. There's anxiety about feeling secure in our relationship and feeling wanted and loved. And finally, there is what is called existential anxiety, which is about trying to find a meaning and fulfillment in life rather than having an empty, unfulfilling experience in where your life is and where it might be heading. So let's now turn to the topic of managing anxiety. If you feel it physically, especially with panic attacks, then mastering your relaxation diaphragm breathing is paramount. Please see my video on relaxation diaphragm breathing for this technique. In brief, this breathing through your diaphragm is linked to physiological relaxation and calming you down, which means it'll calm your muscles and your body and your emotions. Chest breathing should only be used for physical exertion and puffing. Otherwise, when we chest breathe due to stress, then we are encouraging ourselves to feel anxious, stressed, even angry. So, if you find yourself often restless, anxious, panicky, please check out my video on diaphragm breathing, which is an excellent way to breathe off intense emotion, including anger and frustration. The other way to manage anxiety is through improving the health of your thinking. This I mentioned before through cognitive behavioural therapy and looking at whether your thinking is proportional to the situation or whether you're over-appraising the loss of control, the fear, and whether this is impeding your happiness and functioning in life. Please see my videos on cognitive behavioural therapy for these important tools. It also means taking behaviours that challenge your anxiety bit by bit. So this is under the umbrella of systematic desensitization. It's often used in phobias, which is another form of anxiety. Spider phobias, fear of heights, gradually exposing someone to the fear. And if we use the analogy of a spider phobia, then the gradual desensitization might be seeing the spider on the other side of the room in a jar and gradually becoming closer on the desk, and if they're capable, the person's arm itself. This will be linked to relaxation breathing. This breaking down into manageable steps can be used to think about job interviews or ringing up somebody. This type of approach can be used to manage anxieties so that each step is manageable and the person has a degree of control to exit, but they are choosing to overcome each step. And when you add the steps together, the final result is achieved. For instance, if someone is agoraphobic and doesn't want to leave home, maybe step one is stand by the open door. Or maybe even stand by the closed door and imagine themselves walking out. Step two might be open the door. Step three might be walk onto your porch at night so that you're not observed with the light out. Then it might be walk out to your porch during the day, and just excessively increasing the distance to the letterbox, and at times of day where the person is less likely to run into people, and increasing the distance around the block and exposure to people, not crossing the road when people come, and so forth. So each step needs to be gradual, manageable, and linked to diaphragm relaxation breathing and positive healthy self-talk to keep the person positive, motivated, and more rational. So please see my other videos on diaphragm relaxation breathing and the technique to learn there. Also see the video on managing panic attacks, which definitely requires the skill of diaphragm breathing. And also in future my videos on cognitive behavioural therapy to look at the health of your thinking. So anxiety is a major problem in society. It's an unpleasant feeling. It can even be felt as a buzzing in the stomach, like a nervousness before an exam. It can feel like an empty hollowness, a restlessness of the body that makes you pace. And it can be very hard to identify what is going on, which is why I do encourage people to see a counsellor, whether it's via your GP or direct, and try and find ways to identify what is occurring for you, what are the triggers, what are the ways to manage it. You know you're in trouble when you're starting to avoid to the point where you're avoiding tasks at work, going to work, taking days off work, avoiding social situations where you're isolating, starting to make too many adjustments where life is now controlling you, where your happiness in life is not working for you. So please seek help. The worst thing is not to seek help, to feel embarrassed, to feel ashamed. Your GP has seen this many times, a counsellor would have seen this. Find a friend that's is supportive, or a family member that's supportive and accepting. Choose the person wisely, and just seek help. Life doesn't have to be so anxiety provoking.